Hey folks, welcome to the Phillies Talk Podcast presented by Team Toyota. Corey Seidman and Jim Salisbury here with you as always, and it's the middle of September and the Phillies are participating in yet another descent. They have played poorly this month. It's a continuation of a theme that has really been constant since 2018 of these losing Septembers, the Phillies running out of gas badly down the stretch. Jim, another poor performance on Tuesday night against the Chicago Cubs, which were another team that came into Philadelphia, lacking talent, a team that's not in any race. But the Phils just can't get out of their own way here. They're not hitting. The starting pitching has been shaky lately as well. And here they are at 500 with 18 games to go.
Yeah, pretty amazing. They've had another poor homestand here. If you look at it, they have lost, 7 of 8, I think, of their last 8. They are 4-8 in the month of September. I mean, what team goes 4-8 out of the gate in the month of September and actually considers itself a real playoff contender? It just tells you how bad this National League East race is and how the wild card can fan the hopes of mediocre teams. So, yeah, the Phillies are really fading fast. You mentioned September. I mean, since 2018, so that's 4 Septembers now, 3.5 Septembers. They are 37-61. So that's 24 games under 500, and that's just terrible at a time when you should be turning it on. They're fading badly. I know there are a lot of reasons, but they've had injuries. They've lost Eflin. That hurts. They've lost Hoskins. That hurts. Realmuto is playing banged up when he plays. That hurts. But the biggest factor is they have not played well. They have not delivered. You look at last night's game, leadoff home run by Odubel Herrera, energy in the ballpark. The offense shuts down for 6 innings, does nothing. One bad inning, as with Aaron Nola on Sunday, costs Kyle Gibson on Tuesday. And they're back to 500. They needed to clean up on the Colorado Rockies and Chicago Cubs. 2 teams, the way I look at it, 2 teams that have completely raised the white flag on the 2021 season. And the Rockies did it in the offseason. The Rockies did it last winter when they traded away an all-world talent, Nolan Arenado, on 8th salary to do it. So the Rockies, surrendered before the season. The Cubs surrendered at the trade deadline when they, just peddled off all that talent that helped them win the World Series a few years ago. They're playing a bunch of young guys, some of them you've never heard of, but they're scrappy. And they scrapped one out over the Phillies last night. So the Rockies and the Cubs were combined 26 games under 500 coming into Citizens Bank Park. Or I should say they are currently 26 under 500. But either way, they're just abysmal teams. And the Phillies lose 3 out of 4 to the Rockies, and they're off to an 0-1 start against the Cubs in a 3-game series. We talk a lot about the Phillies have not been to the postseason since 2011. They're desperately trying to break that drought and avoid it from reaching a decade. It's the longest playoff drought in the National League. They're also riding a 9-year streak of non-winning seasons. They have not had a winning season since 2011. And there's a very real possibility they won't get there this year, which is just astounding with a $205 million payroll with Realmuto, Harper, Wheeler, Nola, McCutchen. With some of the talent they have on that team, it's just astounding. But here they are, 72-72 at 18 to play, and they need to go 10-8 to have a winning record. And I think there are serious doubts whether they can do that based on where they've played.
Yeah, Dave Dombrowski has a lot of work to do this offseason. This team needs to be shaken up big time. We've talked about the depth issues in recent years, but it's been especially highlighted this season because, I can recall so many times that you and I have talked about how, especially Bryce Harper, that if he performs like a top 5 MVP candidate, or if someone like Zach Wheeler performs like a top 5 Cy Young candidate, that the Phillies should be in good shape. And both of those things are happening this year, and they're still so far out of it in terms of like actual contention. Turning over the middle of this roster is going to be crucial this offseason. There are a lot of guys this season that the Phillies have relied on who just haven't done much. Didi Gregorius has had a lousy season. Aaron Nola has had a lousy season. I know he's had his moments here and there, but when you have Aaron Nola going up against a rookie who's made 1 start for the Rockies, the Phillies have to win that game Sunday. They have to win that game Tuesday when they have Kyle Gibson going up against, a mediocre pitcher in Adrian Sampson for the Cubs. There are just so many games and series the Phillies gave away this season losing to bad teams. They themselves have performed like a bad team here in the month of September. And when you look around at like what can actually be accomplished, I wonder if it's even possible that the Phillies can turn this into an actual contender in 2022. There's still so many holes, so many positions that need to be filled, and you can't keep going out there and signing guys to $100+ million contracts. I mean, you have Harper, Realmuto, Wheeler on those huge deals. They've all pretty much been there this year. I mean, I know Realmuto hasn't had as good of a season as he's had in years past, but you need to be a better team when you have those guys producing.
No question, they have huge holes. They have their annual holes in the bullpen. They now, with Zach Eflin going down, have a hole in the rotation, and they were going to need rotation depth anyway. And shortstop, third base, center field, and left field are all concerns offensively and defensively. So yeah, they have big holes and they can't go out. You know, they've got Wheeler. They signed Wheeler to a $118 million deal. Realmuto to a similar deal. Harper's got a $330 million deal. You know, you just can't plug every year with big money free agents. I expect to see them be active on the free agent market. I don't know if there's going to be another huge ticket item in there, but they're going to have to spend some money to fill these holes. But you can't just walk out there and fill 4+ holes if through free agency. And it just goes back to show they have not produced enough talent to come up and fill these holes. Young, difference-making talent that can come in with low salaries and high expectations and contributing performance. They haven't done that. They just haven't drafted well. They didn't draft well in recent years. They haven't drafted well going back to 2005, even back to the previous 2 regimes ago. So and it's all cumulative, and it's biting them now that they don't have enough talent, don't have enough depth. I mean, to me, it's an embarrassment that a team with a $205 million payroll has to, plug the 5th spot in the rotation with their bullpen. And not just for the final week. Sometimes we hear about that as, the season's running out, the final couple turns, you plug it with the bullpen. No, they're doing it for 6 starts for a full month, that they don't have the talent and young depth and of pitching to come up and fill that hole. And they just have not done enough to produce their own talent and procure their own talent, difference-making talent. And like I said, it extends back to about 2005, and it's really hurting them now. I don't know how Dombrowski is going to fill all these holes this winter. I agree with you. The roster needs a turnover. It needs a shake-up at the middle of the roster. You're not going to do anything with Realmuto and Harper, with Wheeler. I still want to believe Nola can have a bounce-back season next year. These things happen. And I still think we just need to start framing him as not a 1 or a 2, as just a mid-rotation guy. You need them all. You need all 5. But there's a lot of work to do for this team. I don't know how they're going to solve shortstop. It's been a problem offensively, defensively. I think they need a leadoff man, a guy who can play center field and lead off and get on base. And we talked last time about them having the 29th worst on base percentage in the leadoff hole among Major League Baseball teams, and the 28th worst on base percentage in the number 2 hole. That's a big factor, I think, in all this. We talked about their club record, 30 blown saves. I think 10 of them have been in the final inning. That's 10 wins. Just so many things, and then like we said, you can't plug all 4 of these big holes. And it's really 4 or more when you count the pitching staff. You can't plug them all in free agency. You just can't. And that raises a complete new issue that we haven't even talked about: the importance of Alec Bohm.
Yeah, you used the word embarrassing there, and I was going to say that it's also embarrassing that with all this happening, that several of the positions where the Phillies are weak, outfield, third base, they have invested huge resources in recent seasons in first-round picks. You have Alec Bohm, Mickey Moniak, Adam Hazley, who really haven't been answers at any of those positions at any time. And, the manager, Joe Girardi, like when Moniak's come up, he hasn't played him much, Adam Hazley hasn't been in the picture since early April. Alec Bohm is at AAA, kind of not playing right now. Not sure what's going on there, but that's a major issue in that is that they've spent these high picks on these guys, hoping that they fill these voids. and they don't even consider them for those roles.
Alec Boehm has to be in this lineup next year. I mean, you need to. I think he's got talent. I know he hit a rough spot this season, but I think it might be part of the development curve. He's got to fill a role for you next year, whether it's at first base, if there's a DH, whether it's at third base, if he's improved. But I don't know if you can even roll the dice and put him at third because he struggles so badly defensively. But they need him to contribute. And yeah, you mentioned the outfield picks they've spent, and it goes back to a guy named Larry Green. I mean, if Larry Green and Mickey Moniak are what you think they are, you might never have signed Bryce Harper. And it even goes beyond Alec Boehm when you look at the outfield and how they spent high picks on outfielders over the last decade. You look at Cornelius Randolph was their first round pick in I think it was 2015. You look at Mickey Moniak was their first round pick in 2016. Adam Hazley. If Cornelius Randolph, who they compared to Tony Gwynn when they drafted him, and Mickey Moniak was number one pick overall, if they're if they develop into the players that they should have been, or at that point in the draft, then you might never need to spend all that money on Bryce Harper. You might have homegrown guys in your outfield. So it's hurt them because now they've had to exhaust so much on payroll and filling all those holes with top of the game talent. But not having Randolph click, not having Moniak click, not having Hazley click, really has hurt this team. Not having, if Boehm doesn't click, it's going to really hurt them. I still think there is something there, and he needs to fill a spot in that lineup next year. Just because he's young, talented, and expensive, you can't just keep trotting out these big contracts at every position. It's just it just doesn't work.
And Bryce Harper's been pretty vocal about players that he wants or things that he thinks the organization should do. How important is keeping him happy here in the short term? I know he has the no trade clause and he wanted to be here long term, but this is 3 years into his tenure here, and the Phillies really haven't moved the needle or progressed much as a team. How much do you think he's going to have a say in things this offseason?
I don't know that he'll have a lot of say, because I think management, ownership, and Bryce Harper all share the same goal, and that's to win a championship. They didn't bring Harper in here to be a $330 million hood ornament, and they didn't re-sign Realmuto and sign Wheeler to finish in third place, and that's where they're headed. So I do think there's that shared objective, and that's to win. But man, they got a long way to go. They got a long way to go when you can't go out and when you're floundering to stay afloat in a horrible division. You got a long way to go.
And what about Joe Girardi? First off, what do you think his interest level is in maintaining this and continuing upon this path with the Phillies? Does it seem like he's having fun or enjoying this? And then you wonder, above him, how his job has been evaluated, how they've graded his performance this season, because there have been a lot of different issues. There have been some questionable decision-making on the field. There's been his reluctance to use some of those young guys, opting for players like Ronald Torreyes or Travis Jankowski over them, which you couldn't really fault in the middle of the season because those guys were producing and coming up with clutch knocks and good defensive plays. But I just wonder where Girardi falls in all of this.
Well, you touched on a couple things. Is he enjoying himself? Sometimes I've asked myself that question. That's going back to May, whether he's enjoying himself. I mean, he came from the Yankees where, and they've had some similar problems to what the Phillies have had this year. But traditionally they fill holes and they get things done, and don't have a lot of the issues that the Phillies have, with the exception of this year. And I've sensed frustration, and I've wondered at times how much he's enjoying this, and I think he's a good baseball man and knows that not a lot is coming, and I think he's disappointed that they haven't had a lot coming from the minor leagues. And I'll be honest with you, I've wondered at times if he even wants to be here next year. But then I think the competitor in him does want to be here. He's making over $3 million. It's hard to see him walk away from that. The other, piece of all of that is whether upper management even wants him back. He's had a tough year. He hasn't done a great job. He hasn't done a bang-up job. You look at the record. Look at some of the moves in the bullpen that make you scratch your head. But all that said, I put it more on, I just think he hasn't got enough performance from the players. I think injuries have played a factor, though that's not an excuse. But when you look at the personnel he puts on the field night after night, it's a lot of times it just doesn't measure up to the other teams. It measures up at the top with Harper and Realmuto and Wheeler, but there's a big drop off after that. So I think, their struggles at 72 and 72 have been a complete team effort. Everybody's had a hand in it. But, as far as Joe's future, as I sit here on September 14th, I believe he will be back next year. I believe that strongly. I don't believe he's had a good year, but I don't believe he's the sole problem. I still think he's a good manager. I just don't think he's had a good year. I ask these questions periodically, try to keep my finger on the pulse of it. And every indication I have received is that he will be back next year, that they're planning to have him back next year. But that said, there are 18 games left, and I have not seen a lot of fight in this team. So I guess anything can happen over the final 18 games, and minds could be changed. But as we sit here on September 14th, every indication I've received is that he indeed will be back for the final year of his contract. That's that. They need to, he had a quote last night, we just need to play better. And as simple as that sounds, it's so true. You got to go out and play better. Offense can't shut down for long pockets. You can't play defense poorly. I mean, there was a play last night in that they gave up a couple runs in that sixth inning. It was a tough play in front of the visiting dugout for Andrew Knapp, who tried to make a sliding catch. It would have been a great catch. It was a tough play. You make that play, that whole inning might be different. You might not give up those 2 runs. All of a sudden, Gibson's, flying through the first 4 innings, and he makes mistakes over the plate with his fastball. Boom, boom. They just need to play better, and they do. But I'm not, when I look at the lineup night after night and the drop off after the first, after you upper tier guys, they're playing a lot of reserves. And you wonder if they really, how much better they can play. But there's so much to this. It's not just one thing. It's not just Joe. It's not just. It's just all of it.
On the theme of defense, something that was kind of under the radar this weekend against the Rockies was just that, the Rockies are not a good team, but they have a fantastic defensive infield with Story and Ryan McMahon. And in Sunday's game, Brendan Rodgers dove for 2 balls between first and second base, both fantastic plays that he made. Story dove for a ball up the middle that he, spun around and made the throw. That's 3 extra outs, that the Phillies lost in that game that they probably would not have made in the field. And that just highlights the importance of defense in such a close game like the Phillies lost in that series finale Sunday. In talking about guys who might or might not be back next year, one guy who will not be back is Vince Velasquez, who was released by the Phillies on Tuesday after being designated for assignment on Saturday. It was hard to overlook the fact that the Phillies have needed starting pitching. They need a 5th starter. And yet Velasquez, even when he was on the road back from that blister that put him on the IL at the beginning of August, he wasn't seen as a real option in the rotation at this point in the season. Not a good 6-year period the Phillies had with Vince Velasquez in terms of developing him and trying to get value out of that Ken Giles trade with Houston.
No question. I'm just fooling around with my computer here because we were talking about defense, and I just went on the Fangraphs website. Phillies defensive runs saved. They're 29th in the majors at -54. So, how important is defense?
Who's below them?
Well, I'm going to play trivia with you. You're going to guess, but I'm going to look where the Rockies are. And, you just made a great point. You made a great point about what defense can do for a team. The Rockies rank 3rd in baseball in defensive runs saved at a positive 64. So, I don't know that this is the be all and end all of defensive statistics, but, there's validity here. It tells a story. That's a number that tells a story. No pun intended with Trevor's story. And it plays in nicely to your point, but they've been a horrible defensive team since day one. And they're actually better than they were, I think. they're not making as many glaring like, oh my God, they gave him 3 extra outs tonight, made 2 errors, and but I'm sorry for that tangent. Anyway, Vince Velasquez. So it just doesn't sound like they were counting on him down the stretch at all. I mean, to send him off to Siberia because of a blister, a blister. I mean, I get blisters raking leaves, and I don't go to Siberia. So, they just had enough of it. And, and almost like rightfully so. He had a lot of chances over 6 years. I was very surprised, when they brought him back last fall and gave him $4 million. It just seemed like it was time for a fresh start for everybody. The Phillies got caught in a front office change, and they decided they needed pitching depth, and they brought him back. And just the decision to bring him back tells you how thin they were in pitching. Just the decision to bring him back and try to rely on him just told you how bad they failed at building pitching depth. So, so he, they let him go. It was the end of an era. He was Matt Klentak's first big trade in December of 2015. First big trade of quote the rebuild. He was the signature guy in that trade, and I think that's why he got a lot of chances. He had a big arm, and he was just in the feature guy in that trade. So, that bought him time. But in buying that time, he never put together any successful consistency. Second start, he tantalized with a shutout of the Padres back in April of 2016, 16 strikeouts, no walks, 3 hits. You're like, wow, what we got here? But what you had there was an inconsistent pitcher. You could eventually see why the Houston Astros, a smart front office like that, let him go and didn't keep him and made him available for a trade. There's so much more to pitching than just having a great arm. And in a lot of ways, Vinny became a symbol of this latest Phillies rebuild, completely unfulfilled. And he moves on. I wish him well because Vinny was always a stand-up guy, never ducked anybody after his struggles, was a good guy, at least, on this end. And, that's tough when you're struggling to stand there and answer reporters' questions, but he was always a gentleman about it, always did it, was always accountable. But, now a year, maybe 2 years too late, he moves on. And he'll get that change of scenery somewhere next year. I would imagine maybe on a minor league deal, kind of go to somebody's camp and prove it. But he moves on. Like I said, it's very symbolic of a rebuild, latest rebuild that has paid 0 dividends after all these years.
Jim, JT Realmuto was out of the lineup on Tuesday as he continues to deal with this sore right shoulder. I have a couple questions about him. One, just does it seem like the Phillies are going to be able to manage this the rest of the season? Like, is he going to be able to get on the field? And two, more big picture, do you think the Phillies overvalued Realmuto these last couple of years? I mean, they gave him the huge contract and he's 1 year into it. He's had trouble staying healthy. He's had trouble remaining the most effective version of JT Realmuto at the plate because of the injury. He just isn't as much of an offensive difference maker as you'd expect from a guy making like $20+ million a year. And there are 4 years left on that deal.
I don't know if they've overvalued him because, like you just mentioned, there's 4 years left on that deal. So we're going to see. Certainly year one, though, is a red flag with the production and the nagging injuries. And even going back, he's had nagging injuries previously. The very demanding position, and it seems to be beating him up. So, it creates red flags going forward as to whether they're going to get the value they thought they were out of that deal. They're already playing around with playing him at some first base to try to preserve him. So with Realmuto, the health thing is a major concern because his value is behind the plate. Now, all of a sudden, if you have to get him away from there, his bat doesn't play as a corner man, or at least doesn't provide, it's not $25 million a year, whatever he is, corner power bat. The shoulder thing is interesting. Do I think they can manage it the rest of the way? I don't know. I will tell you this. He had a cortisone, or I should say an anti-inflammatory injection on Sunday. He did not play on Tuesday. Girardi said he believes he's going to play on Wednesday. We'll see this afternoon when we get out there if he's in the lineup. We'll see if they can manage it. So far, they've managed it, but it has been a problem. He required this shot, so that indicates it's really not getting better. I asked Joe yesterday, what are you guys calling this? And he said, oh, just inflammation, but clearly something is going on there. And I asked Joe for the second time in just a few days whether he thought Realmuto was going to require some type of off-season medical attention, be it a procedure or something, because we see this all the time. Guys maintain stuff throughout the season, and then 2 days after the season they have a scope. Well, Joe says no. Our doctors, all three of our doctors, think it's manageable. Think it's just he's gonna play through it and be fine. But my instincts tell me just you got to keep an eye on it, because these things they happen for a reason, and I think we have to watch it in the offseason, whether or not it's addressed and whether or not he comes back healthy. It's a concern. I think a lot of it's we're going to find out over these final 18 games and how much he's on the field and how effective he is.
They also tried to manage the injuries to Rhys Hoskins and Zach Eflin, who then both went under the knife, and underwent surgery that is going to take them into the offseason.
And I think deep down inside, they knew both guys were going to need surgery at some point. They knew Hoskins was going to need surgery at some point, but they tried to, he's so important. He wanted to give it a shot, try to get him on the field. I tweaked it a little more. It didn't work. And they probably felt the same way about Eflin because of his history of knee issues. I've heard, on Twitter and things like that, fans saying they didn't act quick enough on those two guys. I disagree. I don't think either injury was career threatening, and they tried to manage the pain and tried to manage the injury to get the player back on the field. That's why there was that lag time. It didn't work, and now both of them have had surgery in season. I mean, you talk about developments that really weren't good for this team, losing Hoskins' bat, but also losing Eflin. I think he made one start post All-Star break. What's that?
I was going to say, if we knew at the trade deadline that Kyle Gibson was just simply replacing Zach Eflin, the entire thought process of what the rest of the season would look like for the Phillies would have been different,
Yeah, I mean, we thought when we talked about, wow, they've got the semblance of a five-man rotation here with the addition of Kyle Gibson, adding him to Nola and Wheeler and Suarez and Gibson and Eflin. That's a solid five-man rotation. Well, guess what? We never saw it. Because Eflin had the knee issue, and he had the knee surgery. I guess it was last week, and it was quite alarming to hear that he's going to require 6 to 8 months. 6 to 8 months of recovery. So he's not going to be ready in spring training. He's not going to be ready for opening day. No way. They're going to have to get pitching depth anyway. And now they're going to have to get more significant pitching depth. Somebody who can step in there on day one and fill a spot in the rotation, and hope Zach Eflin comes back dealing next year, which I guess would be his walk year. He has a lot of incentive to pitch well. But we'll see.
Jim, just to end here on a positive note, I'm just wondering where you think Bryce Harper stacks up in the National League MVP race as we sit here on September 15th, because Fernando Tatis has really tailed off over the last month. He's at 209. The Padres as a team have really floundered, and Harper just goes out there and does it every single night. I know the Phillies aren't winning games, but he's been just a force to be reckoned with since like the middle of June.
Yeah, he really has. I mean, I would expect he's going to finish in the top three, right? There's always that age-old argument: is the MVP the guy who just puts up the best numbers? Is he the guy who puts his team on his back and delivers them to the postseason? Because it's called the championship season. It's about winning championships. And I've always favored a guy that can get his team into postseason. But that said, the Phillies are on the periphery of contention in a weak division. There's a lot of asterisks in this, but they wouldn't be in contention without this guy. So I do think you have to weigh that. He's had a phenomenal run. He's kind of in that what I call that hold it stage, meaning that when he comes to the plate, and if you have to go to the bathroom, you hold it, and so you can watch his at bat. So that's pretty good. I don't know where he's going to finish this. Arenado has really come on as the Cardinals have their annual. They never die. They always play strong in September. Max Muncy, Bueller, Tatis, Harper, with Votto. I guess Votto's in the picture.
Freddie Freeman and Austin Riley are both in the picture.
How can you forget about Freddie Freeman and Austin Riley? It's not an easy one. It's a tough one. Freeman, gosh, he's a beast. I mean, they lost Acuna and Ozuna. Those two guys down there, Freeman and the Phillies have lost players. Braves have lost players, but the Braves have stayed there. And Freeman and Riley are a big part of that. The Giants. You look at the Giants. Brandon Crawford has had a great year, and I'm sure the intangibles he's bringing. He gave Kapler not in his first year, but his first full year, right? Because it was only a short season in 2020. But Gabe Kapler comes in a lot of questions, and he's going to win the Manager of the Year. They have the best record in baseball. It just seems like his veterans really bought in, which they didn't do here in Philadelphia. And I look at the performance of Brandon Crawford, who, just 2 winters ago, there were a lot of whispers that, he doesn't cover the ground anymore. He's kind of well on the decline. He's had a hell of a year out there in San Francisco. So that MVP vote is going to be very difficult and very fascinating. And Bryce Harper is right there. And it's hard to ask him to do more over the final 18 games. But, maybe if he could paint a Superman's S on his chest and have 18 more unbelievable games and keep this team in it, he might end up being the guy. We shall see. He's certainly done his job and done his part for this team in the second half.
All right. Well, the Phillies have the Cubs for 2 more this weekend, and they're at Citi Field this weekend, 3 with the Mets. Their final 3 of the season. Looks like Wheeler and Nola will both pitch in that series.
Big series. I mean, big series. There might be that might be. It's going to be for second place in the division. Phillies could come out of there in third place. I mean, how disheartening would that be?
It would be pretty disheartening if they don't finish with a winning record, which you wrote about at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, and I suggest that you all check out. So that's going to do it for this Phillies Talk podcast. We will catch you later in the week.